I'll call roll.
You know
I'll call
everybody.
roll, yes. Steve Carroll.
Here.
Patty Flynn Harris.
Present.
Peter Talbot.
Here.
We have a quorum
All
of the
right.
technology study.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I was gonna say, that's like the pistol. I know.
Yeah. And I think this is part of the program we, let me turn the floor over to our Apex friends.
Certainly.
So who's running the show?
I will run the show.
Okay.
So thanks all for having us here. I think I introduced Michael. Michael Arndt is kind of our on-site resource. He's here, 5 days a week. I'm usually here, a couple times a week myself, but not here every day anymore like I used to. So I felt it was necessary to introduce Michael to you all and give you an opportunity to see who's running the show now. So I'll just kind of keep things brief, and certainly feel free to ask questions along the way. The summary of work performed over the last year, so a time period from April 1st, 2021 to past Friday. We worked on a total of 994 tickets, and 944 tickets of which have been closed. We have a breakdown of level 1 and 2 cases, which we consider to be more so end user support type of cases, which totals out to be 782 of that total 994, and more or less more critical infrastructure or outage potential related cases, which would be level 3 and 4, which were 135 cases. In total, on project and non-project time, we spent 1,887 hours in the past year, 240 hours of which were spent working on major projects. The number of major projects that we worked on was a total of 9. That's actually a typo. It was actually 11. Mike actually had modified this presentation just before I pulled it up, so I apologize for that. So that number is actually 11, not 9. The total number of support hours provided to the Cheshire Public Schools has been 591, and to the Cheshire Town Municipal Departments is a total of 1,296. Questions?
Sounds good.
We'll get a little bit more detail on the
Sure.
on the school side when Mike Copp's addresses.
So a summary of number of alarms, or at least incidents that we've responded to in the past year. These are ranging from more or less informational all the way up to potential outage level issues. Switch-related issues can be something of a user accidentally plugging another device into the network, or unplug a device that we received an alarm for, potential loop in the network, or a device that's creating issues or errors, on a particular network interface. That totals out to be 166 potential alarms over the past year. Domain controller or domain identity provider related incidents was 4. We had 123 battery backup alerts that were responded to. 32 general server or application related alerts that were responded to. 36 wireless incidents, 12 firewall, and 7 for centralized storage. Questions on any of the potential alarms?
Do you disable workstation, can somebody plug in a USB drive or
So so our
is that one of your alarms?
So we do, however, we don't alarm on it if nothing is found. So we have an antivirus platform that does scan the device before it's allowed to be completely mounted, and if it doesn't find anything, then it allows it to be moved. Anyone else? Total projects that were completed in the past year. We had gone through and we completed an upgrade of the town and school-wide content filtering solution, which is something that is provided in part to us by the Connecticut Education Network. We had upgraded from a more or less single point of failure appliance to 2 redundant appliances. As part of that, we had also acquired additional intrusion prevention systems as a part of that upgrade to the newer iBoss platform, of which allowed us to also consolidate some of our reporting servers, so we don't have any on-prem content filtering services anymore. That's all cloud hosted now, so we were able to decommission some of that stuff in-house.
So when people ask about, are we filtered, do we filter the internet? Obviously we do, because we need to be CIPA compliant. But we use iBoss as that platform. What the state does is they provide the annual subscription free of charge. So we make this investment, well, a one-time investment, and this was 6 years since we had made the last one. We do it on premises, gives us better performance, and we can filter things more granularly and have more different, more sets of rules and logging and all that kind of stuff. So.
Right. And I think it's also important to include too that along with the network intrusion prevention upgrade and sort of the server consolidation component, we actually are able to acquire this iBoss cloud licensing at no cost that's provided to us from the CEN. So even now, more so than ever, we can actually filter more for students that are actually remote.
And we do have, I mean, at this point, we have, every student has a device available in school, so this becomes a very important issue, and that we have to stay on top of.
We also got the advanced threat protection modules from them as
Yeah,
well.
I would assume-
Additional safety.
I would assume that software is getting daily updates.
Multiple times a day.
Multiple times a day,
Yeah, so it's all, so that the threat prevention and the intrusion prevention definitions, they're updated automatically. It's not a manual process that we have to do, so they get updated several times a day, as well as the URL categories and all that kind of stuff.
As opposed to our quote antivirus, which doesn't get any definition updates, because it's next gen and it's using AI to just look for heuristics and things in the signatures. So that's kind of the trend that's gone now. There's no more there a database that gets updated.
Right.
Along with that, we actually just kind of wrapped things up last week on this, but we had upgraded the town and schools, network core switches. Those were going on, year 7 of their lifespan. So we were eligible for some erate funding last year, which we were able to take advantage of. As such, we were able to replace the entire network core, as well as every single one of the switches in all the schools. So last week we hit the ground with a lot of guys, and we replaced every single network switch in every single school last week. So we're glad
And pretty much issue-free.
get that out of the way.
I knew there was going to be a few
Yeah.
blips this morning, but they were relatively minor blips.
Yeah, a couple phones
Really
that
good.
were booted, but yeah, all in all, it was pretty successful. So we're happy about that. And that also allows us to gain more insight. There's some cloud managed features that allow us to get different metrics on usage, as well as just general monitoring. It gives us more insight into the types of devices that are connected, how long they're being connected for, all that kind of stuff that we historically didn't have a ton of insight into, but now we get it a lot easier. So I'm glad we have that. We did perform some outdoor wireless installation over at the library. The library, I believe, got some grant funding for that. So we're able to provide some outdoor wireless for those folks over there.
Where's their outdoor area over there?
It's in the parking lot, so it's actually on the back of the building.
Okay.
So I guess during COVID, folks were showing up and they weren't comfortable going inside, so they were kind of parking in the parking lot and firing up their laptop in the driver's seat and doing what they have to do. So that's something that we were able to get done last year. The building management system upgrade was also something that we worked with both the town and the schools, public works and maintenance departments to upgrade. Provides a more native browser-based management of the mechanicals in all the town and school buildings. There was a lot of, upgrades and visualization and stuff like that helped them kind of manage the system that they were looking for. And plus, there were some security vulnerabilities in the old system that we needed to address. So we were able to get that upgraded along with the operating system software, which was installed under. We normally do, once every year or two, we upgrade our domain controllers to the latest Windows operating system and implement any additional security hardening and features that come along with those new operating systems. And then the big one here, we were able to implement a town-wide multifactor authentication, which now is essentially a requirement by all cyber liability insurance policies. And it's something probably the easiest, security against, compromise of email addresses and stuff like
Right.
that. And just compromises in general, that's how most threats, kind of breach your perimeter. So in the last year, these are kind of the big major projects that we've worked on, getting pushed through. We're, working on a couple of other ones. I don't know if you recall last year's budget, we had appropriated some funding for some battery backup replacements, which fortunately we tried to do along with all the switches, but equipment availability didn't really permit, so we have, half the equipment here, half of it's still in Wallingford, half of it's still, going to be here in June, so it's kind of all over the place, but we're still working on it. So, and the point behind that was actually because there isn't generator power at all the buildings, all the school buildings. And so talking to Ben, talking to Mike, we kind of realized that, not being able to have telephone communications and being able to dismiss students in a reasonable amount of time was kind of an issue. So all of these new batteries will allow for up to 2 hours of runtime for every network electronic in every single school and town building, more or less for emergency response purposes.
A power outage at this point is not just people can't log in and do whatever they need to do. Lighting, door access control, phones, no phone, everything, so.
So we
Well,
figured if
the goal was to size each of those racks with 2 hours of runtime. In the event of emergency, we can get buses called, we can get kids home.
That seems fair.
It may be more than 2 hours.
And it gives us
Yeah.
time if we have to roll up one of the town's generators,
Right.
plug into the school. if it's-
And go around and gracefully shut everything down that might need to be,
Right.
shut down, so.
Are all groups now multi-factor authentication set up for that? I know there was like 1 or 2 groups.
Yeah, so what we're actually working on right now is because there were still some legacy applications that didn't allow for multi-factor authentication. We're sort of sunsetting those and implementing a new product which is called Duo, which allows for more or less a global multi-factor authentication layer, which goes on top of everything, including administrative logins to servers and workstations and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be looking at getting that wrapped up here in hopefully the coming weeks. Sorry, any questions on any other prior projects, ongoing projects?
I just wanted to add, on the building management system upgrade, those upgrades were for the original building management systems installed under the energy performance contract with Westville, which is, I guess it's about 8 or 9 years now, so that was helpful.
So just some of the ongoing, higher level IT initiatives that we've been working on. Of course, collaborative communication, with the introduction of Office 365, and obviously the school's been on the Google platform for quite some time. With COVID, pandemic sort of driving, more remote, digital collaboration communication. We're still trying to sort of, find ways to leverage the Office 365 platform, the Google platform to help do more for folks. Video surveillance, outdoor locations, this is something that's been on, the docket for a little bit of time. I know, the pandemic kind of, paused that for a little while, but I just spoke to, the police department and, Andrew this morning. We're going to be filing for some additional grant money to get some additional outdoor locations by the running trails and stuff like that weren't included in the original budget for the security project included. So we'll be working on that with them to try and get that, sort of drag across the finish line here in the next, hopefully the next 6 months or so.
We're still talking about the locations we originally looked at?
Yeah.
Parking lots on the trail and all that stuff?
Yeah, this is for all like the new ones that
Yeah.
weren't around when we initially did the budget for that project, so.
But not the trail itself, because at one point.
No,
we were
yeah,
talking
at
about
one
the
point we were
trail.
talking
Crosses the road.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no,
what
just
they were-
crosswalks
Yeah.
and hopefully,
That's-
just for
In the beginning, it was
reactionary
really
purposes.
extensive, so.
It was, yeah, no, and this is for primarily, Bartlett Park, the parking lot there, because, the students still use that for parking, and,
Right.
there's some, occasionally some, strings of break-ins and stuff there.
Yeah.
And then, I think the police department's also looking at some license plate reader capability, as well, that they can deploy that's sort of mobile, as well. And then just general infrastructure upgrades, we have a equipment lifecycle, refresh that, we kind of, keep going through, every year, which is the purpose for the $210,000 that we, most of the time, usually always ask for. Last year was a special circumstance with the erate funding. This, upcoming, round of funding, we'll be looking at, refreshing some of the wired network switches and electronics in the rest of the town buildings, improving some of the town-wide wireless networks. The schools actually were wrapped up back in 2019, so they're good for about another, probably I'd say 5 years or so, before we have to start looking at, replacing them again. Video surveillance system storage, those things are just cranking away, so they get beat up, and it's a critical system, so we need to make sure that we replace that stuff, on a pretty regular basis. We'll be upgrading our network firewalls and our edge. Those are going on 7 years of age as well. And with that, hopefully also going to be introducing additional network segmentation. We'll be doing a little more internal segmentation between different networks to kind of, narrow or what I'll call a blast radius, right? If we get some sort of a network breach or security incident, we want to kind of, contain it, where it is, and make it more difficult for that to spread elsewhere. So our upgraded firewalls help us do that. And then just generally some web security upgrades. We want to start enabling more SSL interception, which is secure socket interception. That's something that we started doing with the schools. We're sort of piloting it right now. And that's something that our iBoss appliances, our content filtering appliances, allow us to do. It gives us more direct insight into the web sessions that people are requesting. And so we have a much higher level of efficacy for blocking things that we don't want to be, going out to the internet. So we're working on that. Overall cybersecurity resiliency improvements. Sean, we were just talking a couple weeks ago. Starting to kind of make friends more or less with it's a department of the department. It's actually a branch of the Department of Homeland Security. It's called the CISA. And so what the federal government has been doing is they've been assigning new positions to each state, and they're basically a cybersecurity advisor for each state. And so we, being in multiple different states, and like we in Apex, have sort of developed a relationship with the advisors in the tri-state area. And so we've been kind of working with them on sort of some of the newer recommendations and executive orders that have been coming out in terms of the whole shields up mentality with what's going on overseas right now, just to make sure that we're doing everything that we can for all of our clients. Is being that we work a lot in the municipal sectors, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can. And also just kind of having an open line of communication, right? I mean, we're not perfect. We're not going to sit here and say that we're probably never going to have an incident. It can happen to just about anybody. The world's largest cybersecurity, firm, the World FireEye, they were compromised. So it can happen to anybody. So making sure that we have the right plans in place, we know the right people, we get the right resources involved at the right times. That's kind of what we're trying to do.
If I could, Corey, just real quick, just following up on that, I appreciate you taking those steps to look at that. Some of that came out of some emails we received from CCM advising municipalities of additional steps they should be taking after some breaches around the state last month. And it was heartening to see that we had done so many of the recommendations already. You got to remember, 169 towns. We're ahead of the curve, certainly, with a lot of items on there. But further down this list was a recommendation to reach out to the FBI field office in some of these positions. And just when there's an incident, you don't want to be saying, who do I call? It'd be great if you said, oh, I called Greg at the FBI, and those minutes might end up mattering. So I appreciate you taking that on when I forwarded that to you. And I think, again, it was a good sign that we're down to some of those things on the list in terms of trying to do everything we possibly can.
Connecticut has their own local resources through CTIC as well. I'm a member of an MSISAC. Which I get a gazillion emails a day about 5,000 different threats that are going to take down your network. I don't even have time to read it. Everybody take action upon them.
Exactly.
But
there is a lot out there.
Yeah, and I mean, as a service provider, we're also a member of that, so we get all the same alerts and stuff too. Obviously, we're a member on behalf of the town as well. And then another something that we've always, or at least that was put on, our radar as kind of a long-term, potential goal, is considering data center co-location, and or, complete relocation to cloud services, for critical infrastructure. I think, we can all agree that we've had a lot of, unpredictable weather over the last couple of years. We've had some prolonged, power outages as a result of that. And, let's face it, we can't, justify spending, tens of millions of dollars a year on, tier one, data center facility. And so, as a result, we've, started to kick the tires on, putting together some, estimates on, what it would cost to potentially relocate some of the critical infrastructure that we have here to a tier one facility. And there are actually several in the immediate area, that also have, backup redundancies in other locations in the state. The closest one's actually right in Waterbury. There's another one out in Hartford. There's another one down in Fairfield. So there's a lot of options for much higher levels of resiliency in terms of of core infrastructure, and by that I mean cooling, electricity, generator power. These are facilities that they host services for tier one.
Physical security as well.
Right, the physical security of it, the whole thing. I mean, let's face it, on what a tractor trailer could go, blasting through the side of the building, down Route 10, and it's all she wrote until we, enact our DR plan. So, it's something that has sort of been, on our mind, something that we really want to have serious conversations about in the next, year or so. Because I think with some of the aging infrastructure, I know we just replaced one of the mobile generators, but
Yeah.
the
This really came to a head when the generator in this building failed.
Yeah, I mean, from a,
Last year, it was to know that we literally had those minutes before things
Right.
would have shut down and then would have.
And that was
gone.
just the second strike. The first strike is when the sprinkler pipe that's directly over the server let loose.
right.
because all the environmentals, we just don't have them in place.
Sure.
And you're not gonna spend money to put in a
It
data
makes
center of
sense.
the quality
I-
you need. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that there were so many now in the state, because there hadn't been for so long.
Yeah, there's
So-
a whole bunch.
So, and are you evaluating them, or do you have a?
We've talked to a few. Yeah, we don't. I wouldn't say I necessarily have a a report for you all to
No.
look at, but we certainly understand that that's something that would be a more phased approach, and as part of that would also, and we've been talking to the police department with some of their certifications. And being able to, build the proper, physical security around their data center.
Right.
Would actually be a lot more feasible and less expensive, in a real co-located data center.
Right.
So being able to consolidate everything to one location, build a cage,
Right.
that's certified, for, at least that's certified for law enforcement purposes, somewhere else and not have to worry about it here, is something that, would probably, benefit us long term. Let's face it, there's a lot of energy that, that gets sucked, by the air handlers, and just the general maintenance of it all, and, getting the batteries, maintenance every year. The generator itself, obviously that's gonna stick around, but certainly we put a load on it, every once in a while, so. That's something that, we wanna talk about more, and I think, over the next couple of years, at least the next time we all meet, I'd like to, at least have a very firm report of, some recommendations.
That would be good,
that we'll
because the
come
other
up
thing is that it's also the proximity of where we are to what system, what
Sure.
location we're looking at,
with. Right, absolutely, yeah, for sure. So definitely next time we meet, I'd like to have a report for you guys about that. because
How often would we need to physically go to the actual server itself?
Very infrequently.
Yeah.
With a lot of data center contracts, especially ones that are a bit further out, most data center facilities have what they call smart hands. So they have, technicians on site
Yeah.
who, are approved, to get into your environment, they have access to it. And we say, hey, we're getting a drive light, blinking on this server, can you go check it for us?
Almost
Dispatch
never.
somebody there.
So I'm wondering if the physical proximity matters, just think of being in Indiana.
Oh, that's right.
Doesn't make a
Right.
lick of
Well,
difference.
and
Yeah.
that's, and that's why there's a logic to it as to
Yeah.
whether or not, I mean, we're here in Cheshire, do you really want someplace that's actually Waterbury? Or
Right.
do you want it
Or you
further
want-
away, because
Right.
if something happens
Mhm.
here,
Right.
it's more probably
More
also going to be
likely
to-
affecting the next
Right.
town
Right.
over.
One other thing would be
So-
kind of the latency is how many hops is it on the network? You
Yeah,
want
that's-
someone that's
that's
on
true
it,
too.
that's
Yep.
on a tier 1 node in both
Yep.
That's,
locations.
that's
Yep.
true too.
Right.
So-
Yep.
And one of the dependencies for us, obviously, and it's, you know, it's a kind of a driver in at least our evaluation process is, you know, where does the Connecticut Education Network have nodes?
Okay.
Because
Sure,
they don't
that's
have a
true.
node in every data center, that's where we get our internet services
Right,
from.
right.
Comparing their internet service costs, you know, to somebody else is feasible, but I wouldn't say that they're necessarily comparable for what we get. So it's certainly, I wouldn't say it's a firm dependency, but it's a strong driver. So,
The other determining factor that makes this a little bit more advantageous to us is now you're paying for real estate, correct? Rack space.
Right.
We're down to like half a rack
Yeah. Okay, why
from
not?
what was 4.
Yeah.
So
Why not?
we're able to move into a modest 1 bedroom, and we don't need a
Right.
4-bedroom home anymore.
Right.
Well, and you consider, you know, since we've done the same thing in the police department too, I mean, they have 4 racks over there. I mean, those are consolidated into, you know, maybe half a rack now. So, you know, we could realistically shove everything into, you know, 2 racks,
Yeah.
very small. So,
And a large portion of that is the video surveillance storage, or if we can get that cloud.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's probably 50% of the rack space.
Right, exactly. So as I mentioned, you know, data center co-location, you know, physical resiliency of, you know, of the facilities is something that, you know, it's going to take significant time and effort to make a transition like that, but obviously it's something that, you know, we want to recognize and start moving towards in the next couple of years. Digital time and attendance, Jim and I were just talking about that this morning. You know, it comes up all the time. I know it's not a huge infrastructure, you know, it's really not an infrastructure, you know, project per se, but it comes up a lot, something that I know we've talked about in depth in a couple of different instances. But I think, you know, we had an issue last week with people being able to scan their time cards, so we had to procure a device for them to be able to do that. So it's something that I think we really want to try and drive for next budget cycle. And then just general remote access. We've had an on-premise virtual desktop solution for some time. That's how we provide vendor access. That's how we, you know, had historically, you know, pre-pandemic provided, you know, employee access, you know, while they were out remote. And since most people have laptops now, you know, we've been able to provide VPN access for some folks, but again, with kind of the desire to eliminate or minimize our blast radius for security incidents, we still don't necessarily want your device to be connected to a public network, then have that tethered, you know, through the VPN to our network, right? Creates a channel for you know, for threat exposure. So as such, we still want to try to leverage some sort of software as a service-based virtual desktop access. It's something that has become so inexpensive that, I mean, it's, you know, for the cost of, you know, one broadband internet circuit at, you know, the Yellow House, we can, you know, provide remote desktop services for anybody that needs it at any point. So it's something that we'd like to move forward with pretty soon. And we'll be talking about that probably next time we meet, because hopefully it'll be done. Any questions thus far?
In the past, I know the police department's always been a challenge with the video storage and uploading, and where, just give me a sense of where we are. I mean, is everything operating from their perspective the way?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they've actually, they've been functioning, you know, as far as I'm aware, you know, just fine for quite some time. There was, well, I think we should probably
Well, there was a long
just
time ago when we didn't
identify,
have
yeah.
enough storage,
That's right.
slow.
It was, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, ever since we had performed the major upgrade to the in-building surveillance, because obviously there's also the body camera, there's a dashboard camera.
Right.
Take video, that's a whole different story, but that's also recently been upgraded, so, so far as we're aware, they even have, you know, a mobile camera that they can disguise as, you know, a bird in a tree somewhere that records back to the data center now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we should be pretty well off.
2 other questions. do we undergo, and I'm used to this from a business standpoint with the credit card companies, where you have to go through a compliance review every year or 2 years, and it's very voluminous and it's redundant and everything else. Does Connecticut Education, Systems or anybody else require any such compliance?
So we do a PCI compliance audit by our payment gateway providers every single year.
Yep.
So we actually sit, usually with Don Roulette, and we go through what's oftentimes 150 something plus
Okay, so you
questionnaire.
Yes, I know.
So we certify on PCI compliance as
Yep.
well as we are required to perform at a minimum a quarterly vulnerability scan of all of our public internet circuits that allow for connectivity to their
Now,
services.
does any of that compliance testing, does that require any independent penetration testing? Or?
Not penetration testing, there's a difference between vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. Penetration testing is something that is very intentional and is what I'll call intrusive. If they can, they will actually
Yes.
penetrate and gain access and prove that they can do
Right.
certain things. We've actually never done a full penetration test, but we do actually do 2 different independent vulnerability assessments every single month. So we usually compare those and make sure that we address all of them. Certainly we can discuss a active penetration test. I wouldn't actually be opposed to it, and that's actually something that we could potentially work with the CISA, which is who our regional cybersecurity advisor works through. They actually provide those services, I believe at a very low cost, if not free. So that's something that I actually just sat through a presentation with them a couple weeks ago and talked to them about. So we'll at some point be doing an active penetration test, but it's not something that we've done in the past.
Sure.
I don't know if it was mentioned specifically, were you still using Know before to train your
Yes.
staff? Okay. Was it something, basically it's anti-spam, anti-phishing
Don't open
campaigns, but
email
you
or
actually
anything else
go,
kind of
there's
thing?
modules that you go through for training, and then you
Yeah.
fish your staff, and you see how many people respond and all that
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, we do, I don't know if I want to divulge how frequently we do phishing tests, at least not publicly, but we do them pretty regularly. They do catch stuff, we keep them fresh and different, and, we try and.
One of the last ones we were in when I was working was we snagged the president.
Yeah, Sean's usually pretty good.
I'm on
Does
fire.
that have anything to do with the
Like
last
9
day you
for
were
9.
working?
Right. Right. And
You
then,
could have all the tools in the world.
Yeah.
Oh,
all the
no.
subscriptions in the world,
I
someone
know.
clicks on
Yeah.
an email,
That's
decides
right.
to start putting
That's
information in,
absolutely
and you're done.
right.
It's
You are right.
the human threat vector is the one you need to
Absolutely.
conquer.
Take advantage of gullibility.
of course, before I move on, any other questions just about some of the future, ongoing stuff? So just kind of an overview, some of the, and actually this slide is also, so I'll just kind of go through it. So technology reserve is actually not at 419,000, it's actually at 265,000. The town school security project is still at 220, and largely the technology reserve is down to 265 because of the addition of last year's funds and then the purchase of all the new network equipment for the town schools. And there, let me actually bring that one. So currently we have $265,000 left in our technology reserve capital project accounts. This year we intend on moving forward with a town and schools wide wireless upgrade. We unfortunately put it off last year just because of equipment availability, hoping it was going to get better. It's still not gotten any better. It's honestly gotten a little bit worse. So I think we're just gonna move forward and just begin the procurement process just so we can get it. Because right now we're looking out at about Q4 of this year for you being able to receive the equipment and do the upgrade. So we want to get it ordered as soon as possible. Firewall upgrades, we had actually, there was again some logistics and equipment availability issues this past year. And I think there was also some issues with the police department, their voice recording platform. So we had actually temporarily allocated the funds for the firewall to do that project because there was reaching a point of critical mass that was, more important to address than our firewalls at the time. So we'll be addressing that this upcoming year. And that comes up to a total of about $160,000 that we intend to spend out of the current capital funding. And then we do have some of the other security project funds that I mentioned before, which we have our outdoor locations. And we still have a door access control pilot program that we need to work our way through. And then upgrading our video surveillance storage, estimated to be about a $60,000 replacement, totaling about $182,000. And that leaves us with a surplus in our technology reserve capital accounts of about $105,000. And then the security project accounts down to about $38,000. And in talking with Jim earlier today, part of the money that's left in the technology reserve accounts will ideally be used for replacing workstations. I know we've been trying to operationalize our workstation replacements in the operating accounts, but I think it's been a bit challenging to do so. So we've continued to, I think, purchase things out of capital project accounts for workstation replacements. So I know we made some progress this year. I think we're at $20,000.
Yeah, I think in Sean's recommended budget is 20, it was 10,000 last year, so
Yeah.
baby steps, I guess.
Right, so
In the
we'll
right
do
direction.
partial out of operating, partial out of capital, and usually we like to keep a small surplus in our capital account just in case of emergencies covered by, anything, or cable repairs or things that aren't necessarily under a service contract that can't really be under a service contract.
Corey, I'm just curious about one thing.
Yes.
Sorry, the wireless upgrade,
Yes.
how much is left for the schools? Because you did
So
quite
it's-
a bit.
Yeah, so this is actually just for the controller software.
Okay.
It's actually very minimal for the schools. Most of the cost is actually for replacing the wireless access points that are physically in the town buildings. And then it's the licensing for what we call now the mobility conductor software, which is a new part of your Wireless product portfolio.
Do we need new controllers at the schools, or are those are still, those can be
Those-
upgraded to AOS 8?
Those will still be upgraded to
Okay.
AOS 8. However, in the next 2 years, we'll want to refresh those because they're going to reach the end of their life.
And you need the mobility master, is that just server-based, or is that
So
it's
the,
not
yeah,
an appliance?
so technically, so we're now at, so we're on Aruba OS 6.5.
Yeah,
And don't let the major version numbers get get to you too much because they've skipped the numbers. So it went from AOS 6.5 to AOS 8, and now we're at AOS 10. So AOS 8 was kind of an intermediary architecture redesign where they came out with this mobility conductor, which offloads a lot of the decision-making and analytic role of the Aruba wireless controllers themselves and offloaded it to a server. So that way, the physical appliances can do nothing but just pass traffic and perform, to their peak. And so now with the introduction of AOS 10, it's actually the mobility conductor software is actually cloud-based. So we don't actually need to host anything internally. So basically, the controllers get managed from the cloud, but all the traffic is still handled, inside, so we get the best performance possible.
Because the schools are in good shape on the Wi-Fi network at this point. And,
Yeah,
you know,
we've
we're lucky we get a
all
lot
the
of,
access points, yeah.
thanks to Mike and E-rate, we get, E-rate funding, so we get a 40% break.
And
on
that
those
project, the
investments.
switch project we just did, they got $365,000 for that.
Yeah.
And then for the devices, they got $685,000.
And like I said before, the wireless projects the wireless access points for the schools were completed in 2018 and 2018, so we still got, a couple of years left.
And the town ones aren't eligible for E-rate?
No.
But what about library? No.
Yes.
The library could potentially, the library could file for E-rate, and now that we've, put the right filtering requirements in place for the outdoor wireless, then technically we can do that. I actually talked to Beth about potentially filing E-rate, for E-rate reimbursement for their internet connectivity, because they're able to do all that stuff for us.
I have a great person that I've been using for like 10 years. They're fantastic. They take a percentage of the funding, but it's well worth it because it's a fairly complicated process with a lot of different deadlines.
Yeah.
So it is kind of free money. The issue with the library has always been in the past is that they didn't filter their internet in any way.
Right.
Therefore, you're not eligible for that funding. Right. Because you have to comply with the CIPA.
And so this coming year's capital funding request, we're back down to our normal $210,000. We do have some additional edge or access layer switches in some of the remote town buildings. We need about $60,000 for that. The remainder of the wireless upgrades will be $90,000 for the rest of the town and the schools. And then we do need to refresh some backup server storage in the amount of about $60,000 as well.
Not too bad.
No.
We've been making the investments,
Well, yeah.
so.
Where we were 10 years ago.
Okay.
Right.
I'd rather not think about it.
And I apologize, I'm just going to open up Mike's slide deck here.
How far out do you project your capital spending? Do you project 5 or 3 or 2 or?
For equipment refresh?
Yeah.
So it actually varies based on device. For
We're on about 5
core
or 7,
infrastructure, for core infrastructure, we strive for 5. In some cases, like over the last couple of years, we let it slip to about 7, but we really want to try not to do that.
But do you know, for instance, for the next 2 fiscal years, kind of give a back of the envelope calculation on what your budget's going to be?
Yeah, so I mean, when we actually started requesting the $210,000, that was in anticipation for keeping everything in the town on a 5-year replacement life cycle. But because we had to shift some money around for laptops and stuff like that in subsequent years. But yeah, we don't generally anticipate spending more than the $210,000. It's just last year was
So
special because there was
you tried to smooth out the
So it's $1
spending.
million worth
Right.
of equipment over 5 years, I guess it's 200 grand.
That's the easy way to do it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can.
But there's a couple of slides that are not in the deck that
Yeah,
Mike and I
that's good.
added that Mike's gonna speak to on the schools, just to give you an update. But, I did take a look back at my file on this study group. 11 years ago we started,
Yeah.
and on the school side, we've come a long way, since that time. I mean, we had 1 person per building, now we're and we've been on a dispatch model for many years, so, we deal with tickets based on where they are, and we dispatch the staff, which has been reduced over time based on the ticket count. And then the other piece, which Mike's gonna go through, is the device inventory. Basically, in 2011, we had a PC in every classroom and every administrator, and we didn't have devices in
Right.
students'
And I think you
hands.
had twice as many tickets back then.
And
Yes.
the
When we
break
first
fix,
started.
right?
Yeah.
It was all break fix,
Yeah.
and so, we've adapted to the
Radio
times.
Shack equipment.
Oh my God, worse thing.
Well, the first,
Closets? We
And I'll
didn't
head
know.
off this question before anyone tries to make the rough calculation in their head. 6135, yes, that's more
Okay.
devices than people.
Yeah? That was like,
Due to the fact that everyone has their own device, but we still have computer
Isn't that the
labs.
same for every
Isn't
house?
it crazy?
Yeah, every element.
So yeah, just a quick snapshot of our inventory and just how it's changed over the last couple of years since we met. Prior to COVID, we had already almost been 1-to-1. We weren't at the lower grades. There was a cart in each classroom with devices in it. We've since gone to 1-to-1 for kindergarten through 12th grade. Those are reflected in the bottom number. The student mobile devices, 4275, that's our student population. The youngest kids, kindergartners, have iPads. First graders have a Chrome-based tablet, and then from 2nd grade on, it's a Chromebook. So it kind of transitions them. They start with a tablet-based iOS device to a Chrome-based tablet and log into Chrome, and then go to from the Chrome tablet to the device with the actual keyboard. I see us going to just Chromebooks, starting at 1st grade. The Chrome tablets have kind of been a little bit of a pain. But it was a nice little, it was a nice intermediary step, I suppose. The Windows desktops, 773, is down dramatically at one point to what you had come forward, close to 2,100 desktops or whatever. Obviously, 7, 8 computer labs just at the high school full of PCs. We're now down to 773. Those are office staff at the Board of Ed, office staff at the schools, principal, secretaries, nurse, and then one in each classroom that basically drives everything, all the other equipment that's in that room. So a document camera, interactive flat panel or smart board, if you will, we still keep those as as an essential piece of equipment in each classroom. As opposed to getting teachers laptops and having them plug everything in, we just figured that this was a better way to go. The desktops tend to be a little higher powered than the laptops. Other issue being that if the teacher doesn't show up and there's a sub, there's no technology in the room. Was another issue. So, some Windows laptops, some MacBook laptops for the administrator. We still do have iMacs, which I'm replacing this summer for downstairs for CTE. So I'm a big proponent of giving people the tools that they're going to use in the real world to do these jobs. So graphic design class, photography class, video editing class. If you take those classes at the high school, you can walk into a printing company and probably get a job as a layout guy, you know.
Yeah.
And we're teaching the Adobe suite. We're teaching the products that people are using in the real world. So that's where the iMacs are being used. Teacher mobile devices, we give every teacher a higher powered Chromebook. We didn't go with Windows laptops. An Acer Chromebook, very nice. Basically it's a Windows laptop that runs Chrome. It's an Intel processor, quad core, extra memory, all that. The teachers love them. It makes me so happy when I come to a meeting with a bunch of teachers and everyone has it with them and they flip it open. And then the other staff mobile devices for other staff, and that's everybody else that works for us, is a larger screen Chromebook, just kind of not as high powered because they're not doing video conferences with kids and stuff like that. So that was a result of COVID, those top two. But if we had to go remote right now, everyone has a device and we just go remote. Granted, we did go remote in 2 days and get everyone devices, but I'd rather not go through that fire drill more than once in a lifetime. So that's kind of where we are as far as devices. It sounds like a lot to manage. Luckily, with the Chrome platform, these devices are very easy to manage. With a click of a button, we gave the SAT test at the high school, push down for the kids in that grade level, basically kiosk mode. When they turn it on, they boot it up right to the test. Now I did that with a couple of clicks from my office.
Oh, cool.
So.
Just before we go off of this, I did want to touch on a couple of things. First of all, Mike mentioned we did get 685,000 to replace the Chromebooks. That was a special erate funding that Mike and erate online applied for. So that enables us to keep the Chromebooks refreshed. They do run out every
5 to 6 years.
So
6 years typically.
you have to get them replaced. So we're in the middle of recycling, refreshing all those, rather than do it all over the summer.
It happens to
Mike
come
and
at a
his
good time.
team are trying to do it, as we go.
The other thing with that funding that been mentioned, when we purchase Chromebooks now, just so you understand the way that they get them in 7th grade, the first year of DOT, they come to documentation in Chromebook. They keep that Chromebook until they graduate. The 6 years fits in perfect for us.
Yeah.
So the devices are roughly $240 maybe, sometimes a little bit less, and we're getting 6 years out of that. We put a hard shell protective case on in 7th grade, and they keep it on, going all the way through. So that's kind of what we're doing now, is pushing those devices through. So it becomes easier for us to manage.
And then Mike's team fixes these in-house to the extent that they can be fixed, so cracked screens, keyboards.
Luckily, with the models that we've been using these Dell Chromebooks for a while, and I've gone through them all, HPs and blah, blah, blah. The Dell is by far the easiest to repair and the lowest repair cost and the lowest incidence of repair. I have 8 years of historical data on that to make these kind of decisions now and know what we're going to have for repair process.
And we offer parents a protection plan, so if they buy the protection plan, that basically funds the replacement parts that we have available in the school. So really, it's not coming out of our budget. We even have had some excess funds to buy some replacement equipment. So, it's actually running very, very
There's
well.
never a student that doesn't have access to technology. If it breaks, you go to the library, you get a new one. You figure the rest of it out later, but the learning doesn't stop anymore because it can't. Here's a breakdown of our tickets using Incident Direct, which is the program that we still use. 3,600 total tickets. By the way, I have 5 technicians that are kind of
boots on the ground in the various school buildings, a supervisor of support services that works directly under me and next to me at the Board of Ed, and Mark, and he supervises those technicians. So that's what we kind of have for troops, if you will. Just pointing out a couple of the bigger ones there. Mobile devices were 21%. Now that we have 5,000 mobile devices, as reliable as they are, it's still a big portion of it. CPU/computer, that's actual hardware that's on people's desks, 18%. Interestingly, we only have 700 computers and we have 4,500 mobile devices. Yeah, it's almost the same amount of support tickets for the two. Smart boards, 14%. That's down quite a bit, and we replaced probably about 25% of our inventory. The smart boards we used to have had the projector mounted in the ceiling and then a board and a whole bunch of cabling.
Right.
Now with the flat panel, that kind of goes away. There is no bulb, there is no projector, there is no overheating, there is no cleaning. If one day you come in and it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. And you return it under warranty, or if they're out of warranty, we put it in a new one. But there's not a lot of maintenance on those. Not to mention a lot less energy consumption than we have with the projectors. So that's down, that's a much smaller slice of the pie. A couple of the ones up top, Assistive Technology, 2%, and Support Desk, 2%. The reason I pointed those out, even though they're smaller, Assistive Technologies are the technology that we provide to the special needs students. That has gone down a lot. We used to buy purpose-built devices of various things that they sold to help kids to speak, and they were specific and they were expensive, like $4,000 for like a Dynavox, which we can do now with an iPad, with an app. And maybe the app costs $100, but we've saved a ton of money, and we've saved a ton of support time on those devices. And we've transitioned a lot of those kids over to Chromebooks that didn't really need Windows-based devices, which a Windows device in the hands of a 8, 9-year-old is a lot more difficult and a lot more things that can go wrong. So the other item there, Support Desk, is 2%, which I would like to be higher. We have the ability for any teacher to request someone to come sit with them and train them on anything that they want at a time of their choosing. So if I have 20 minutes free at 10 o'clock on Wednesday in my classroom and I need help with my Power School gradebook, we assign the correct person to that and they come one-on-one and help to tutor that person. So instead, we don't really do a lot of district-wide PD events anymore, but now it's more on-demand, real-time, specific to you and what you need. And some people don't like to be in a group setting, afraid that they're going to hear like they don't understand it or whatever. So I need to do a better job of promoting that because I think that's fantastic. That's it.
Cool.
Impressive.
That's it.
Yeah, very good.
Any questions?
CEN, Vin, I know the state's dumping a ton of money into CEN over the next couple of years. Is any of that affecting us, or is it just build-out stuff?
I mean, it does affect us in that, the bandwidth that we get has been increased over time. And now, we pay a small fee to CEN, still a great bargain, but
For our
I mean, so
connections. And I E-rate those and get 40% off.
yeah. So the long-term strategy, and I mentioned the data center relocation before. So to answer your question in short, yes, at some point we will be able to take advantage of a lot of that funding that's being dumped into the Connecticut Education Network. And the reason why is because they're offering what we more so call like metered Ethernet services, where essentially the Connecticut Education Network would potentially turn into our new network core. And so we have diverse routing between multiple different locations in the CEN network in our own private space to get to different places. So if we had a data center in Hartford and a data center in Fairfield, we could look like they're all in the same place, and we'd have geographically diverse internet circuits through CEN. And so right now we can't necessarily do that because that infrastructure isn't exactly built out yet. But with the introduction of new fiber runs and just their expansion of additional data center services and metered Ethernet services, we'll be able to potentially take advantage of some of those things and potentially do away with like what we currently have right now, which is like our dark fiber, which is all leased and at a pretty significant premium. So we can potentially save costs, gain more resiliency, and options and where we end up putting all of our data. So
They're kind of doing the same thing we're doing. They're refreshing because it's time for them to do a refresh too. I'm on the CEN advisory board. They're trying to market these services because they realize that there's some potential. They're offering, for districts that aren't big enough, they don't have their own firewall or someone to manage it. Firewall as a service. DNS hosting as a service, where you can contract out with them at an incredible rate. And you get the support of the engineers there who are all fantastic. So that's what they're trying to, just to market that a little bit more, which helps to keep the cost down, down for everybody, yeah.
We're good. Thank you, Corey.
Of course, you're welcome.
And Mike. Always doing this job.
Thank you.
Yeah, these guys do work together all the time.
I
so
know they
a lot
do.
of the- a lot of the good that happens comes from that collaboration, which we appreciate. So you need
And when you
Corey
think
and
of the
Mike.
complications of the multiple locations, the number of users, all the equipment, there's a lot going on.
All good, all good.
We always try to tie it back to the end user though. It's always helpful to know kind of who you're fighting for or what you're
Yep.
fighting for.
Yep.
So Michael comes to our technology and curriculum meeting every 2 weeks. Although it's not his thing, I think it gives you more of a sense of,
What people are.
this is education and
Yeah.
K-12 schools are a
Yeah.
much different environment
Yeah.
than some of the other customers
Yeah.
that you may have. So once you start to learn like the
Yeah.
lingo and stuff like that, it makes it easier, yeah.
Yep, good,
So, thank you, everybody.
sounds great.
Thank you.
Okay, I lost my, are we, back to our agenda, are we, a review of budgets, is that,
I mean, you wanna start, or you want?
or?
Well, the budget, we,
I mean,
Kinda just did
more or
it.
less,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
I just wanna make sure we're not,
and we're not taking up the
okay.
capital budget with the council just yet.
Right.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I
the
don't have
capital
anything
budget is a
specific.
smooth number from year to year
Yeah.
anyway, so
Yeah.
hopefully it's a non-event.
The rest of the actual budget lines for us,
Okay.
probably for here, it's just all regular, there's nothing
Yep.
new added, it's all regular
Okay.
subscriptions and licenses and everything else.
All right,
added, so, good there.
we wanna go into executive session then, we wanna say goodbye to our friends from Apex, or are they staying? I didn't know.
Yeah, oh, yes, we would just be for the.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you all, good to see you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
I'll,
Thanks,
leave
Mike.
your tickets.
Very well done.